Welcome to our next episode of Past Conversations. Absolutely delighted today to be joined by Victoria Wallace. Victoria is the Director General of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, an organisation which has a work staff of over 1,300 people based in over 150 countries. So no mean feat, the job that Victoria has to do day to day. I'm going to pass over to Victoria now. She can tell you a wee bit about herself and say hello.
Hello, lovely to see you, and thank you for inviting me along. I'm Victoria Wallace. I run the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Well, that's a bit of a lie, because it's the sort of organisation, I think, that even with, if the head office in Maidenhead spontaneously combusted, the dedication of the people on the ground would probably mean that nobody would notice for about 6 or 7 years, and eventually somebody would politely ask if they were ever going to be paid. So it's an organisation which is incredibly important to a huge number of people. And it's been a real pleasure for the last 5 years to be at its helm, ensuring that the memory lives on, but also the structures are maintained and that we thrive as an organisation. I came to it from Leeds Castle, where I was Chief Executive for 10 years. But my first sort of career, if you like, was in the Foreign Office. So I started life as a diplomat. And so travelling around the world with the CWGC has been a real honour.
Now, Victoria, one of the things that we've been asking everyone that we've been speaking to so far is about their memories of studying history at school. Any memories that stand out of that for you?
Absolutely. I've always loved history. My dad was a history wonk. He actually was a scientist. He was an agronomist, but he loved history. And so at weekends, we used to be taken off doing what he used to call castling. So going off and looking at castles. We lived in Bodiam, which has got a pretty spectacular castle of its own. And so I always assumed that history would be something that was going to be incredibly important in my world. And then I failed history O-level. We had a really spectacularly inept teacher, and almost everybody in the class failed. And to start off with, it was history that I didn't really believe. And this was the 1980s, and it was 1870 to 1970. So it didn't really feel much like history, at least half of it. That should qualify me absolutely to do my job. But I know absolutely nothing about the First and the Second World War as a result of my school history lessons, sadly. So yes, so history is a bittersweet thing. I never therefore did it as A-level as I would have liked to. I did languages instead, which held me in quite good stead. But yeah, in terms of academic history, not so much. The team have learned not to ask me anything with dates in it, and certainly never to ask me the difference between a battalion and a division. I wouldn't have a clue.
Victoria, I would say that you have a very, very interesting job. Your job title is the Director General, obviously, of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. But what does that involve? What do you do day to day?
Well, I'm the Chief Executive. I have a fantastic management team who work below me, who ensure that we deliver what the commissioners set out. So the commissioners are slightly unusual. They're both a governance board, like a board of trustees or directors, but they are quite literally also the commissioners of the service. They are our customers because they represent member governments of all the men who we care for, men and women we care for. So what I do effectively is work with the commissioners to come up with the strategic direction. Then, we break that down into sort of 5-year chunks. We then deliver a business plan for every year. I make sure that we get the money to do all the things that we want to do. So, for example, throughout the centenary, when we started to do a whole load of new projects, things we hadn't done before, I was able actually to go to different organisations, different funding agencies and say, look, we're doing this. We think it's quite interesting. Would you like to help? And that was fantastic because it then enabled us. So I'm both the enabler and then the person who makes it so. And so I don't do it alone. I've got a wonderful team. The management team in Maidenhead and the area directors all deliver the services on the ground. And we've changed those services a little bit in the last few years. We we were an organisation which were quite happy to mow the lawns and keep monuments tidy and neat, and really didn't mind if anybody ever visited. We did it almost in spite of the visitors. Now our focus is very more to encouraging people to commemorate, to get people involved. Very few people now remember any of the men and women buried in our cemeteries or commemorated on our walls. And so what they know about their history quite often, and so people are becoming more interested in their family roots and their family connection to the Great War and to the Second World War. So they are finding these people who are related to them or who come from their hometown, and they want to remember them, want to know more about them. And so that has now become a new task for us, is to ensure that the memory of the fallen is preserved, as well as the monuments that look after them.
It's with real sadness that we know you're about to be leaving the CWGC. But if you were to now look back and reflect upon the time that you've been there, particularly during the centenary period of the First World War, what memories stand out? What do you remember the most?
Oh, it's a really difficult question, because there have been so many really fantastic moments. I think two would relate to centenary events. There was an extraordinary moment about 6 months before we did the centenary of the Battle of the Somme, when I was standing with the planning committee under the Thiepval Arch. It was still under scaffold at that point in phase one of its renovations. And we were talking about what the event was going to be like. We were there at night because we were going to light the monument, and that was part of the project. And we were standing underneath it, and I'd been listening on my phone to a piece of music by George Butterworth and Banks of Green Willow, because he's commemorated on the memorial, and it was so beautiful. And I'd just been talking to the director of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, who was there ready to do the planning for the big day. And it was quite spooky underneath the scaffold and underneath the arch at night in the dark. And the wind came up, and it started to get through the pipes of the scaffolding. And I swear to God, it sounded like the arch singing. It sounded like all of those men whose voices hadn't been heard for 100 years. And that was remarkable. That was an amazing moment. And it was really very special to be in there so early with the planning of that event. So when the day came and the Butterworth music was played, it was spectacular. Another music memory is listening to a beautiful piece of music by Peter Maxwell Davies as we crossed on the ferry from Hoy to where we commemorated Jutland. That was so remarkable, because now it's such a quiet, the islands have got, I don't know what the population of Orkney is, but it's really pretty tiny. And to imagine what it must have been like with hundreds of thousands of sailors around there, and that big cemetery, and a very complex event, but that was very, very special. But the times I also loved were the non-ceremony times. I spent a lot of time in East Africa. My husband's from Tanzania. And so Africa was a huge theatre of war with massive casualties, which people tend to forget about. And so we have these scattered cemeteries across the Rift Valley. And I did an amazing trip 2 summers ago. They went all the way from Addis Ababa down to Zanzibar, most of it overland in a minivan. We ended up sort of climbing onto Grave Island in Zanzibar with the honorary consul with his trousers rolled up and the British ambassador, so we could go and honour these men from the HMS Pegasus who are buried there. It was just fantastic, the whole trip, and totally memorable. I've been so blessed to see so many places that we operate in, and these amazingly dedicated teams. I've been to places I never thought I'd go to, and I'm just really grateful for the 6 years I've had.
Now, Victoria, as I've made mention, as Director General of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, you are in charge of a lot of people in a lot of places. And you also were the first female Director General of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. And I'm just interested to know, if we've got young females who might be watching this conversation, what advice would you give to them with regards to both management and leadership?
I think it's really interesting. I think I've never been qualified for any of the roles I've got. I'm possibly just about for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. But before that, the moves I made were on paper totally bonkers. There was absolutely no reason why I should have been able to run 100 in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I could run an Excel spreadsheet, which is probably more than most people could in the Foreign Office in those days. But I think women underestimate what they can do. And quite often, if they are looking at a job description, they'll exclude themselves from applying because they'll look at all of the things and say, well, I can do that, and that, but I can't do that, and I've never done that, and I don't know if I could do that, so I won't apply. And actually, what I've seen more and more is that what boards are looking for, what appointers are looking for when you go for a job, is somebody's attitude and imagination and vision. They don't particularly care whether you can do every little bit of that job description. And if there's something which you haven't done before, my God, you can learn it. And as long as you sit and listen carefully when you get into the role and don't leap into things before understanding the context of them, you can do anything. And I think too often women are more modest about their abilities. And I'm blown away by the quality of the young interns we've had in the last few years. They've been absolutely visionary and fantastic. But the number who would say to me, oh, well, I'd really like to do that, but I don't really think I could do this, that, and the other, and I've never tried that. And you just think, girl, just have a bloody go. Try it, because you never know what you can achieve. I've been phenomenally lucky in that I have also great support at home. And so you can balance home and work effectively. But I don't think there is any job in the world a woman should say she can't do. You just got to have a try.